I'm sitting here on a lovely New England afternoon, and I'm chatting with Miss Hannah Shaffer. Miss Shaffer, it's a pleasure to be talking with you. Now, I heard that
Thank
you
you.
just successfully kickstarted a game. Congrats on that. Could you tell the
Thanks.
folks at home what it's about?
Yeah, so I just kickstarted a game called 14 Days, which is sort of a hybrid board game RPG. And it is about living out 2 weeks in the life of a person with chronic migraines. So yeah, little bit of a different kind of game.
Absolutely. I mean, I've never heard of a game quite like that.
Yeah.
Now, can you tell me a little? Do you suffer from migraines yourself, or what made you want to create a game in which people suffer migraines?
Yeah, I do suffer from migraines. I've gotten them since I was maybe like 14 years old, so that's over a decade now. And I've always sort of thought, that they were like a part of my life that I could never sort of do anything productive with, if that makes sense. Like they were just this thing that only sort of held me back. And as I've gotten into game design and have been making more games, I just thought like, oh gosh, could I make this a game and sort of share this experience with other people in a way that could both make it more productive for me and possibly, help people understand what it's like?
Well, I must say that is a very interesting way of going about sharing an experience of sorts, even if it is a painful experience. Could
Yep.
you tell us a little bit about the way that the game plays?
Yeah, so in the game, it's a two-player game, which is also a little bit unique. And each player takes on the role of a character who's somebody who suffers from chronic migraines. And in the game, basically, you have a number of like required tasks that you have to accomplish throughout the week. So maybe you'll have a certain number in, a job. So maybe you have to go to a job 4 days a week, or maybe your job is 7 days a week, or if you have a partner, maybe you have, a certain requirement in the love category. And you start your day and you plan out the tasks that you want to do. You can do 3 tasks a day, and then you end up rolling a die to see sort of what you can actually do based on the severity of your migraine. And in the game, a 4 is a bad migraine, 5 is severe, and 6 is debilitating, where you can do nothing that day.
Huh. That sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
So this is a board game. Now, you ran a Kickstarter. How did that go for you?
It went really well. We almost doubled our funding, not quite doubled, but we came close. We met some of our stretch goals, and I think we had, what was the total? I have the page up here. 363 backers. So that's, a lot of people for a game that's really sort of a niche subject matter.
Absolutely. Now, would you say that? Do you have any advice for people who are running their own Kickstarters for games?
Oh gosh. I mean, so much of it depends on sort of who your audience is, but I would say that, if you want to kickstart a game, you at least have to have some sort of established audience going into it. And that doesn't mean you have to have made a game before, but you at least need to have, taken your game to conventions, connected with people in the industry. I think that's sort of the most important thing that sometimes stands between people and success is just whether they've made those connections or not.
Very interesting, and I definitely agree with you that marketing is kind of crucial to running a successful Kickstarter.
Yeah, and
Um,
you don't have to be super well connected, but just it's as long as you're talking about your game, I think that's really what matters.
and as long as you have people talking about it too, it's very
And
important.
talking about it, that helps too.
Very nice. So now, how long have you had this idea? Was it something that you've had for a while, or just comparatively recently?
This is actually pretty recent. I mean, I sort of always have a few game ideas on the back burner, and I think that this idea, I think I came up with it around February. So the time between coming up with it and designing the game and kickstarting it was actually not that long.
That's fantastic. So you have had a relatively quick turnaround time from idea
Yeah,
to
for this one.
planning it out to execution. That's
Yep.
interesting. Now, I'm going to have to ask you, what are some of your favorite board games, and would you say that they've had any sort of inspiration on your own?
Oh, that's a good question. All right, well, let's see. I'll think about some favorites first. I like Seven Wonders. I like Dixit, which I think is a great game for sort of introducing people to board games who have only ever really played Monopoly before, or Life. So I think that I tend to like games that sort of balance creativity with strategy. And then, have you ever heard of the game Keep Cool?
I've
Is
not heard of that one.
Okay, it's a little bit more esoteric. I don't think it's even in print anymore. But a game like Keep Cool, which is about sort of balancing climate change with industry. I think games like that actually had an impact on this. Sort of the idea that you could make a board game that was both fun as a board game and also had sort of an environmental or emotional impact.
I hear you on that. I've not heard of Keep Cool, but it definitely sounds like an interesting concept.
Yeah, you should look into it.
Yeah, definitely. Because personally, I'm one of those folks. I'm huge on video games, but I'm guilty of not knowing board games nearly as well as I should.
That's just fine. I'm big into the video games also. So.
I mean, I have seen a bit of a resurgence for board games in recent years, which is absolutely wonderful. What do you think accounts for that?
Oh, I think that crowdfunding has contributed to that a little bit. I think that having a game idea and then getting that idea accepted by a major game publisher that's really hard. And even if your game is great, there's so much competition. So I think that Kickstarter has really opened up the possibility for people to sort of take their games straight to fans. And I also think sort of some of the normalizing of just what it means to be a gamer, which used to be sort of a bad word. That's becoming a much more acceptable term now.
Yeah, definitely. That is wonderful.
Yep.
I think it's in large part because the arcade generation is just growing up in leaps and bounds. It's kind of funny. I think video games right now, culturally speaking, are kind of where comic books were about 15 years ago. Just starting to be accepted. So yeah, I am happy to see the acceptance of games and the culture around them. So what are some of the challenges that you've encountered when developing this game?
Yeah. So with this game specifically, or just games in general?
This one in particular, although I would like to know what else you run into regularly.
Yeah. I would say with this one in particular, I was sort of nervous about whether anybody was going to be able to get behind the subject matter. Like if, tabletop is sort of narrow, and then RPGs are even more narrow, and then you have an RPG tabletop game about headaches. There was some anxiety about whether people were actually going to come out to support the game, or if I was going to be able to reach to the people who I feel like the game is really made for. So some of that was a challenge, kind of figuring out how to market it. And I would say that was actually the biggest challenge, was that question of where the supporters were and how to talk to them.
Huh. Interesting. So, but you managed to meet this challenge, and did you take your game to cons, or?
This one I didn't. No, this one didn't go to cons. I did do a lot of playtesting. I started by sending it out specifically to people who experience chronic pain to,
really?
Get their feedback about whether they felt like it was representative of their experiences. And then I opened it up to a wider group of playtesters. And then, fortunately, also One Shot Podcast, that's a podcast for RPGs, picked it up and did an episode. And that was a big help in, introducing more people to the game. So, getting the word out.
Exactly. So you found the folks who would be in your prospective audience. You said, hey guys, this is a thing about you. I just want to make sure, is this right? And then also you talk to the folks who are into board games and such, so...
Yeah, so, sort of opening up those circles more and more as you go.
Right. Very good. Now, I'm going to have to ask you, did I already ask you what was the most difficult part of developing? My brain kind of shorted out on that.
Yeah, that
right,
one.
I did, didn't I?
It's a good question, though.
Agreed. Yeah, sorry, my brain just...
That's all right.
But, so what was your favorite part of developing this game?
Favorite part. I think Finding that the game, despite the subject matter, was actually fun was really cool. Sort of having these stories come out in this game that's about living with chronic pain and sort of living a life where you're experiencing a lot of deficiency, and then finding that within this game there was actually the possibility to tell really cool and rich stories about, people succeeding or having relationships or, successful jobs. That was really fun and a rewarding part.
Yeah. That's interesting. So you found that your board game had this unexpected emergent narrative, essentially.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Mm-hmm.
Huh. Well, that's quite serendipitous. So, I mean, now, how does one get into becoming a board game designer? I mean, I know that some people, they love video games, and so they wind up becoming video game developers, but board games, that's something else entirely, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, it's funny because when I tell people that I'm a game designer, most of what I do is role-playing games. So at first they assume that I make computer games, and then they guess board games, and then role-playing games I've just never even heard of, generally. I would say that, first, it's good to have a love of the hobby. To go in caring about it is important. And then, connecting with other people in the industry, going to local game nights, going to conventions, and then making a draft of a game and finding people to play test is like, you're well on your way at that point. But playtesting is really important, and a lot of people want to skip that step, and you just can't skip it.
Right. I mean, sometimes you wonder, who plays tested Monopoly? Oh, right. It was a commie who play tested Monopoly, wasn't it? But, yeah. So, what advice would you have for somebody who wants to get into making board games? In addition to playtesting, of course.
Yeah. In addition to playtesting, I would say, start today. Don't put it off. I know that most people have full-time jobs. Don't quit your day job. It's not an industry that is going to make you money overnight. But working on it in sort of little fits and starts. I don't even know if that's the right phrase, but working on your game in little bursts, and then sharing it with people. Bringing it to game conventions. There are conventions like Metatopia, which is a convention just where designers can bring games that are in progress and can sort of play test them in a supportive environment. So finding stuff like that is a really good start. And then there's things like Kickstarter, which allow you to support the creation of your game without having the financial capital necessarily.
Absolutely. I mean, you do need the social capital first, of course.
You need, the social capital is really important, and I think that some people forget about that. They take their game to Kickstarter and think it's going to be a runaway success, and they've never talked to anybody about it, and that's just not going to happen. But the tools are more accessible than ever, so it's a great time to be making games.
Very cool. Now, so I know that you do have some. You told me quite a bit about your history as a game designer. What other games have you made?
Yeah, I don't have a super long history as a game designer. The first game that I made, that's sort of the first published game, is called Questlandia, and it is a collaborative, GM-less kingdom-building role-playing game where you build up a fantasy kingdom together and then sort of watch it progressively crumble under the weight of its own social failings. And that was kickstarted in 2014. And besides that, sort of just little games that, I've taken around to friends but haven't published yet.
Questlandia sounds really interesting. Are you familiar at all with Asimov's Foundation series?
No, although I've read some stuff.
I've actually been reading. I read one book of that series every year, and I absolutely love it. But essentially,
cool.
The premise of the series is that a man named Harry Seldon predicted the fall of a galactic empire, and so he sees it coming, and so he's what's called a psychohistorian. So he says, okay, so this is going to happen socially, this is going to happen politically, and these things are going to cause the collapse. I can't stop it, I can't slow it down, but after the collapse, I can shorten the Dark Age by starting an encyclopedia project. So the book is sort of about that project.
Cool.
But yeah, that sounds a little bit like Questlandia in that you're watching your kingdoms collapse over time. So it's like you're watching the factories that led to the degradation of that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds similar. I'm gonna check that out. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think you might. You'll probably enjoy that series. I mean, it's very popular. So,
Hmm.
but yeah. So now, how did you get the name Questlandia? I've never heard of anything quite like that.
Yeah. The name sort of started out as a little bit of a joke, sort of riffing off of, the idea that every fantasy, that sort of there's these fantasy tropes, and one of them is like the quest, that,
Ah,
everybody has to go on an epic quest, and then that most fantasy names sort of end with some sort of ia, like Aria, or, I don't know,
Moria,
Moria, yeah.
Portlandia.
So it kind of just started out as the working title, the silly working title, and then because it was a game where you actually made a new kingdom every game from scratch, I actually kind of thought that the sort of generic like Questlandia, fill in the blank here, just kind of worked. So it stayed. Some people hate the name, but I love it.
Yeah, now that there's a story behind the name, folks, you have
There
to go
is,
on a
there is.
quest to the land to find how it came to be known as Questlandia.
Exactly.
Exactly. Oh, very cool. So now, would you say that any video games have influenced you as a board game designer?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Sometimes it's hard to say how something has influenced me directly, but I mean, sort of earliest gaming experiences are like the Monkey Island games, the really early, like late '80s Monkey Island game. I was a big fan of point and click games, despite the frustrations that come with them. And more recently, I've really enjoyed some of Terry Kavanagh's games, like
VVV, yes.
VVV. So many V's. I never remember exactly how many V's. And then Super Hexagon,
Oh,
and
yeah.
which I love. And I can't say exactly, how the games have inspired, like have directly inspired my game design, but I think that they're sort of always in the back of my head when I'm thinking about how do I make this mechanic work, or how do I make this part move smoothly into this next part.
Now, would you ever consider moving into the video game space?
Yeah, yeah. It's something that I think about. And initially, that's where I had hoped to start, was in video games, and then sort of wasn't gaining any traction there, and decided that, too much computer, I need to just like back away from the computer and make a tabletop game. But video games were definitely my first love, and I often think about returning to them as a designer.
Huh. So if you had like free reign to make whatever you wanted to make, what sort of game do you think you would make?
Oh, what sort of video game?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Unlimited
God.
resources.
Oh, that's such a hard question. I think I'd probably return to my sort of first major game idea that I had after college, which was the one that never got made and sort of turned into Questlandia, which is a game about a post-collapse world, which is a very popular topic right now, where people have to deal with the problem of overpopulation, have invented this machine that turns people into these beings of pure energy, sort of like ghosts, but a little bit more spiritual. And these beings are now sort of coming back to Earth and trying to help the Earth, help restore the Earth after, after years of sort of floating around in the cosmos.
Huh.
I still love the idea, and I would still love to make that game. So if there was a way, I'd love to see it happen.
That almost sounds like it could be an Arthur C. Clarke novel. I'm not.
Yeah.
Arthur C. Clarke. Have you read Asimov's The Last Question?
I haven't, no.
Okay, that was also. It's a very popular short story. It's very good. I recommend taking a look at that one. Sounds. I mean, just like it sounds marginally like what you're doing. Well, what you have planned to do one day.
It's a very sci-fi. I mean, very inspired by all of the sci-fi that I've read throughout my life. So,
Oh, what sort of sci-fi do you love?
Ray Bradbury was an
Oh.
early first, and I know that now it's sort of considered a little bit dated, but Martian Chronicles was the first sci-fi book that I ever read, and it was just a big inspiration. And then big fan of Douglas Adams, and then a little bit also Philip K. Dick. So that was some of the early sci-fi canon that inspired me.
Nice. I know. I'm personally a very big fan of Bradbury. Actually, I just purchased, here we go. I just purchased my own copy of The Martian Chronicles
Oh, that's great.
the big sale that they had on books on Amazon. So
Great. Have you
Yeah.
read it yet?
it's on my to-do list. I'm
Wonderful.
planning on
It's-
getting to it like right after I do the next book in the Foundation series.
Cool. I look forward to talking about it. It has some of my favorite short stories in it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I read The Illustrated Man. I loved that collection.
Yep. Yeah, and they have
Okay.
lots of overlap in sort of the things that he talks about in
Yeah,
his
thematically,
stories.
Have you ever seen Ray Bradbury Theater?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's a tricky find. I do know that some of the episodes are available on the internet, but essentially it's a bunch of Ray Bradbury's short stories adapted for TV, and it does show its age quite a bit. Like, it looks very late 80s, early 90s,
Yeah.
but it's very cool. I'd recommend taking a look. Also, what was the name of the story with the girl? Her classmates were jerks and locked her in a closet.
Oh, is that a Ray Bradbury story? I don't even remember that one.
I remember PBS did an adaptation of it.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I don't remember that one at all. That's pretty
All
dark.
Summers in a Day. Yeah, All Summer in a Day or something like that.
Huh.
She lived on Venus. Yeah, that's like one of my favorites.
Cool.
Like the
Yeah, I'm
PBS.
gonna write down Ray Bradbury Theater.
Yeah.
I'll write that down.
Yeah, this one wasn't actually this one PBS adaptation wasn't part of Ray Bradbury Theater, but it was still very cool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I do miss the days when PBS used to do adaptations of sci-fi films. Well,
Yeah.
books into films. Yeah. Like, did you ever see? Oh, is this one by Le Guin? Not The Dispossessed. It's this one where this guy's dreaming, and his therapist is like Antwerp.
Is that's not Left Hand of Darkness?
No,
is it?
Left Hand of Darkness
Okay.
was like eternal winter on his planet.
Okay.
But no, this one was. Oh, man, I feel so embarrassed that I can't remember this.
It's it's
was
okay to
such a
not
good
be able
story.
to just pull up every sci-fi book ever written on.
But yeah, that is really wonderful how your work is inspired by science fiction. It's interesting because there's a bit of like an academic divide regarding science fiction and other literature. Like, it gets looked down on. But would
Yeah.
you say that sci-fi as a whole deserves to be lumped in like that?
Oh, absolutely not. I think that, out of the sci-fi that I've read in my life, it's sort of exploring incredibly academic subjects, and just sort of they're just sort of once removed from what we know them as. So I think that sci-fi is a great place to explore like social inequality and gender divide and race issues, and I think that it's changing. I think that sci-fi is sort of gaining a rightful spot in academic conversations, as are games. But you're right that for a long time it was just sort of seen as like pulpy and sort of
novels.
disregarded.
Dime novel kindling from a fire, yeah? Very, I'm not gonna lie, there's been some really bad sci-fi made, but
There's been some, totally trashy sci-fi. But
for all the terrible stuff, though, there is some awesome stuff out there.
there really is.
And I think, like, it's interesting to note that good art informs other good art. So when you create stuff, the stuff that you loved, be it sci-fi or fantasy or literary fiction, it informs your work, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely. And if you're looking for a game version of sci-fi stories that are creating sort of socially aware academic sci-fi, you should check out any role-playing game by Joshua A.C. Newman. I don't know if you're familiar with his work.
I have spoken with Mr. Newman a couple times on Twitter. I have to take a look at his work now, yeah.
Yeah, so his games, Shock Social Science Fiction and Human Contact, do a really, really great job at sort of exploring those social, intellectual spaces in sci-fi.
Very cool. Mm-hmm. Well, Miss Shaffer, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Now, for the folks at home who might be wondering where they can get your game since the Kickstarter is over, where would they go?
So my website is makebigthings.com, and 14 days isn't available yet, and I don't think we're going to do pre-orders, but you can sort of follow its availability on makebigthings.com, and if you want Questlandia, you can get that through either makebigthings.com or go straight to questlandia.com.
Fantastic. So is there like an convenient email list that they can join, or a Twitter feed perhaps they can follow?
Yeah, if you follow me on Twitter, my Twitter handle is @handbandit. That's a great way to sort of stay up to date with the progress of the game.
Fantastic. Well, Ms. Shaffer, I wish you much success on your game, and I cannot wait to play it when does it come out, by the way, this year? Or?
October. Should be
October.
late October is when we're shipping it.
Comic-Con season then, huh?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Good overlap.
I'm looking forward to playing it then. Well, I hope
thank
you
you so
enjoy your
much.
day, and thank you so very much for talking with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for your time.